brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. This is Africa in Business on Channel Africa. A quick look at what we've got in store for you. South Africa anticipates tomorrow, which is Wednesday, the 12th of November, the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, he's set to table the country's medium-term budget policy statement. What are the expectations from there? We'll be speaking this afternoon to economist at Anchor Capital. This is Casey Sprague. Also, he'll be providing some clarity on whether the National Treasury is endorsing the South African Reserve Bank's shift towards a lower inflation target of 3%. And we focus on what really is the focus for the continent during this era, and that is infrastructure development. How is the African continent going to be financing its infrastructure, especially considering the staggering $1.3 trillion annual financing gap? This was part of the discussions at the All Africa Summit. That's the All Africa Pension Summit that's currently taking place in Uganda. So we'll touch base this afternoon with Mishek Bandwane, the Secretary General of the Africa Social Security Association. In the meantime, you can continue interacting with us on all the various social media platforms. On X, Instagram and YouTube, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook, we are on Channel Africa.
Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
In a moment, we'll be talking to Casey Sprague, an economist at Anchor Capital. This is all around the medium-term budget policy statement that's coming up in just a few minutes. But before that, the jobless rate in South Africa, well, the job markets in the country, job market's definitely changing, at least in how it is measured. But for millions of South Africans, the struggle to find work is as real as ever. As of the third quarter, the country's unemployment rate stood at 31.9%. That is a decline of 1.3% when compared to the previous quarter. What this means is that 8 million job seekers cannot find work in South Africa, making it one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Dimakatso Lishoro filed this report.
In the third quarter of 2025, South Africa's unemployment rate edged down slightly, but is still among the highest in the world. According to Statistics South Africa, the official unemployment rate now stands at 31.9%. That's 8 million people actively looking for work out of a labor force of just over 25 million. But for the first time, that headline number comes with a new set of categories, part of a broader international update to how labor data are reported. Risenga Maluleke is a statistician general.
Coming out of the international classification of 2023, that we would be putting a pilot in 2024 of the improvements that we would be making. And these improvements are not the first time we make.
Those improvements mean a more complete picture of jobs or lack thereof. Status SA has now added what it calls time-related underemployment or underutilization and a new group called potential labor force. Soli Malai, the acting Deputy Director General for Population and Social Statistics at Status SA, says these are people available for work but not actively looking.
The first indicator is the normal unemployment rate. I think that one is quite straightforward. The second one, we're just taking into account those who are working, but they are saying to us, we actually are available to work even more hours. And this indicator, we've been tracking it even from the previous quarters. So the third one, we're looking at the potential labor force. And the reason why the potential labor force, because these are the potential employees that can actually be part of your labor force. And we are unpacking them a little bit further to say those who are available and those who are not available, but they're seeking. So the indicators just give you a sense and a deeper understanding of your labor market.
Out of the working age population of 41.9 million, 25.1 million are in the labor force, of which 17.1 million were employed and 8 million are unemployed. That leaves 4.5 million of them in that new potential category, including 3.5 million discouraged work seekers. When these groups are added together, the picture darkens. The combined rate of unemployment and potential labor force rises to 42.4%, and the composite measure of labor underutilization, which adds part-timers who want more hours, climbs to 44.9%. In plain language, almost half of South Africa's working age people are either unemployed, underemployed, or available but not working, says Maluleke.
Our unemployment rate, as we have indicated, remains at 31.9% as the headline unemployment. And of course, the combined rate of unemployment and time-related underemployment takes the 8 million plus the 700,000 divided by the 25.1 million of people in the labor force out of the working age. And that returns a rate of 34.9%. The combined rate of unemployment and potential labor force is sitting at 42.9%.
Behind the formal statistics lies an economy that runs for many of the books. The informal labor market now employs about 4 million people, or 23% of total employment. Desiree Manamela, Chief Director of Labor Statistics, elaborates.
Now, we are saying that people that are in informal employment, they must have access to social insurance. In this case, we are talking about pension. And if a person that we interview says that they do not have access to pension, we go and ask them additional questions in terms of, do they have access to paid leave and sick leave? And the two must be available, both of them at the same time. So if it is no to those questions, then these people will be in informal employment.
These numbers are punctuated by the racial divide that remains stark as Black people continue to suffer the most from the lackluster economy, with an unemployment rate of 35.8%, well above the national average, while unemployment among white South Africans sits at just 8.1%. Statistix says most of the gains this quarter came from construction, which added 150,000 jobs, and community and social services, up 116,000, but manufacturing and finance lost tens of thousands of positions. Meanwhile, youth unemployment remains a national emergency. 58.5% for those aged 15 to 24 do not have jobs. So while the categories may have been tweaked, the story hasn't. Too few jobs and too many South Africans still searching for work or waiting for their chance to be counted. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakato Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Be inspired. Stay informed. Channel Africa, the beauty of life. Now available anytime, anywhere with our new app.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. So what is South Africa's Minister of Finance going to propose in order to boost the economy? What are the key reforms that he is going to be announcing tomorrow, which is Wednesday, the 12th of November? South Africa's Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, is set to table the country's medium-term budget policy statement. Some economists are hoping for updates on key reforms to help boost the economy amid increased financial pressure on consumers. Casey Sprake, an economist at Anchor Capital, says the minister should give clear guidelines for identifying and phasing out low priority or underperforming programs within the budget to reduce overall expenditure or reallocate funds towards government priorities. Also, providing clarity on whether the National Treasury is endorsing the South African Reserve Bank's shift towards a lower inflation target of 3%. To discuss the expected outcomes of South Africa's medium-term budget policy statement, here's Casey Sprake, an economist at Anchor Capital. A very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show today.
So, Casey, what are your expectations come tomorrow, the 2025 medium-term budget policy statement? What do you expect to see that would indeed signal genuine commitment to fiscal consolidation?
Well, I think you mentioned it, from a high level. It's just showing this willpower from government to keep fiscal spending constrained. Up until now, we're starting to see early indications, and of course, we will get the proper numbers tomorrow. But I think a key factor shaping this year's performance has been sort of the more delayed adoption of the budget, ironically, with all of the political noise we had towards the beginning of the year. And that sort of distorted normal spending patterns compared to prior years. But I think at the same time, we have seen sort of robust, revenue growth that's underpinning much of this sort of fiscal improvement that we've seen bandied about of late. So there's a one sort of set of positivity. So in terms of how much, fiscal sort of spending has been constrained, we're not too sure yet if it's just a case of delayed budgets or willpower from government. So I think that will be very key for us, as you mentioned, to get an understanding of removing wasteful expenditure, no further unnecessary support to SOEs, etc., and just really try and be well aware of the poor fiscal state that we're in as a country.
I mean, we've just been talking about the job numbers as well, even though there's a slight improvement. But if you look at the youth between 15 to 24, that is still, uncontrollably high. So those two certainly are working hand in hand. Now, there are a lot of economists who are hoping that the minister will be announcing some key reforms to help boost the economy. Which reforms do you believe
I
would have
think
the
for us,
highest impact?
yes. I think at this point for us, prioritizing the strengthening of infrastructure investment at the moment is what's really vital to unlocking sort of South Africa's longer term growth potential. You mentioned before, the continually poor unemployment numbers, etc. None of that will come right in our economy until we actually start unlocking growth. And at the end of the day, investment remains sort of a significant constraint on economic performance in this country. If you look at sort of your real gross fixed capital formation, that's still around about 20% below its 2015 peak. And I think public sector investment in particular has also deteriorated further, and that's sort of reflected as in the weakened state of our energy, transport and logistics sectors, and that's really what's constrained growth in the past decade. So if we get the spending priorities in those right places, we can really just get the economy moving again. And I think in tandem to that, also if we could see a provision of an update on government's reform agenda, particularly aimed at scaling up private sector participation in this infrastructure delivery, that's really key.
Now, earlier this year, SARS announced that it's moving towards a preferred target of 3% in order to enhance price stability and to support long-term economic growth. What would be the implications if National Treasury formally endorses this lower inflation target?
Well, yes, then we have basically the formal sign-off that we need that the Reserve Bank will now start targeting 3%. So essentially that means the Reserve Bank will have the mandate it requires to take the monetary sort of policy steps it needs to keep inflation constrained to 3%. And that would primarily play out in the Reserve Bank's decisions to either cut interest rates or increase, etc. So at this point, South Africa's inflation rate is trending well above 3%, looking to move towards 4% at the end of the year. So should we get this lower target, it would technically mean within the short term, at least, I don't believe we'll be seeing any more significant interest rate cuts with the Reserve Bank trying to keep inflation down low, just to constrain that spending in the economy so they can keep inflation within appropriate targets. Over the longer term, though, the Reserve Bank believes that things will rebalance and we'll be able to maintain better interest rates for consumers and businesses across the board with inflation anchored.
So what is the flip side of the current levels remaining between 3 and 6%? What are the risks if this is actually not achieved and inflation expectations are not anchored?
I believe that's where, economists, I think, across the board are quite separate on the viewpoints on this. You have some who informally, endorse the Reserve Bank's perspective, the way they've modeled these sort of numbers. Then you get ones like myself who are a little bit more skeptical about this, because a lot of the SARBs sort of model around, formally targeting 3% is the belief that if they follow this target, inflation expectations, as you mentioned, across the economy will start to come down. So it's important to remember that within inflation expectations, the whole sort of theory around inflation is that it's often self-fulfilling. So, for example, if you believe that you only get a wage increase of 3%, you sort of adjust your spending accordingly. But if you believe you're going to get higher price setting wages, you tend to spend more, etc. And in South Africa, that's, of course, extremely nuanced given the strength of our labor market, our trade unions, the very large public sector wage bill. So I believe that, just simply hoping expectations will come down in an economy like South Africa that has many of its own structural issues isn't quite so simple. And in the last commentaries coming out of the Reserve Bank, they've actually alluded to that, saying that inflation expectations aren't quite coming down as they sort of had hoped. But I think it'll be an interesting process. It's important to bear in mind the Reserve Bank under the current governor has been successful in sort of anchoring expectations around 4.5% mark. Up until the current governor's term, inflation expectations were well sort of above that. So they have got a good track record in sort of forcing the economy down to where they want. And the reason why the Reserve Bank chooses to do so is that they're very much in the belief that, of course, high inflation rates in an economy like South Africa is most detrimental to the lower income consumer groups in the day who are spending on groceries, etc. Hence why they find it so important.
And I guess we'll have to wait and see what the announcements are tomorrow. Casey Sprake, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Casey Sprake, an economist at Anchor Capital. She takes us to 22 minutes after 4 p.m. She mentioned about strengthening infrastructure investment there. Just a reminder that we are going to be having a conversation around the All Africa Summit. They also focused on this on a more continental level and scale.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
Wake up with gratitude, hope, and the African spirit. Channel Africa, now easier to access than ever before. WhatsApp us on +27 63 406 9126. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is 23 minutes after 4 p.m. Africa in Business, looking like the U.S. Senate also in business. The U.S. Senate has passed a crucial funding bill that could bring the longest government shutdown in history to an end. The bill passed in a 60-40 vote, with nearly all Republicans joining 8 Democrats who split from the party in order to approve it. The House of Representatives will now have to pass the bill before President Donald Trump can sign it into law. The deal will fund the government until the end of January. For more on this, we joined on the line by SABC correspondent in the United States, Nick Harper. Nick, good afternoon. Good to be with you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
So, Nick, what was the main point of contention that caused the delay in the funding bill vote in the first place?
Yeah, it's been quite incredible. Now the longest shutdown in US history, not quite over yet, but the end is very much in sight. And what we have had is a very clear division between the Republicans and the Democrats, with the Democrats saying that they would not vote on any bill unless it involved and included important extensions to healthcare subsidies. There were millions of Americans who would be going without healthcare, or the healthcare insurance that would double, triple in value and in costs to them. And therefore, Democrats wanted to ensure that within the bill, there was this mechanism that would keep costs down for millions of Americans. The Republicans, though, said no. And there has been this more than 40-day impasse as a result. However, those Democrats breaking with the rest of the party, joining their Republican colleagues, voting on legislation, even though they haven't managed to win that key concession on healthcare that they've been pushing for throughout this whole debacle.
Well, the bill passed in a 60-40 vote, with nearly all Republicans joining 8 Democrats who split from the party. Now, what does the voting breakdown tell us about the current state of political alignment in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, I think what we saw were those Democrats, moderate Democrats, who are in states that have a large number of Republican voters, who they themselves will have their seat coming up for re-election in the coming years. And they are simply worried that unless they join their Republican colleagues, their own position, their own job may be in jeopardy when voters go to polls in the future. But the Liberals within the Democratic Party, they're furious. They say that they absolutely needed that key provision for healthcare subsidy extensions. And they are mad that the conservative or moderate Democrats within the party chose to join the Republicans. So what we've seen is not just a split along party lines between Republicans and Democrats, but now a split within the Democratic Party between the Liberals and the moderates who supported the Republicans.
So what has been the financial cost of this delay? or either disruption in government funding? And what are the human and, I guess, the social impacts of such a shutdown of this nature?
Yeah, the actual financials on this will be very difficult to work out until it's all over and perhaps in weeks or months to come. But the thinking was going into this that the US would potentially be losing tens of billions of dollars every single week that the shutdown continued. And it's gone on for 41 days now. So many, many weeks. That's the overall cost to the US economy, the potential loss of GDP. But the individual cost to workers out there, federal workers, hundreds of thousands, about 750,000, simply have not been paid since the beginning of this shutdown. And that has involved air traffic controllers who've been expected to turn up to work but haven't. And that has led to staff shortages, and as a result, the government has cut the number of flights at some of the busiest airports. So an extra knock-on now is for Americans, travellers trying to get around the country on these domestic flights, who have seen thousands of delays or cancellations. If they're heading out on business trips, that impacts business. If they're heading out on holidays or vacation, that has a financial impact for them as well, for losing those flights that they were hoping to get on for holiday. So really there has been this knock-on, this trickle-down for many Americans, and then there is this substantial loss to about 1 in 8 Americans, 42 million in total, who received benefits to help them with food assistance. They have not been able to get that during the shutdown, and that has, of course, caused huge problems for them and their simple ability to buy groceries each week to put food on the table.
You were very clear at the start of our conversation that it's not yet over. Yes, we may be nearing the end of it, but it isn't quite. Another thing I think that's quite important to mention here is that this deal will fund the government until the end of January. So what could be the risks of a recurring shutdowns or a funding crisis, and why is this just a temporary fix?
Yeah, and quite incredible the way that the US government funds itself in a way that really no other country around the world does. Simply put, lawmakers every few months, maybe as long as a year, need to reapprove legislation that keeps the government funded. And that has been the real problem in recent years. The fact that Republicans and Democrats simply do not see eye to eye and therefore find it very difficult to find common ground. So yes, they might get this short-term deal agreed this week, but like you say, it'll only run till the end of January. And around the end of January, we will have this same situation, Republicans and Democrats trying to find common ground to again keep the government funded, to again keep paychecks rolling out to federal workers, and that food assistance going to low-income Americans. So yes, it's a fix, but a temporary fix, and one that we will encounter again as we head into the new year in just a few months' time.
And are there any spillover effects for foreign economies that are linked to the US fiscal and monetary dynamics and aid? I mean, how does this domestic funding stalemate impact the United States standing internationally?
Well, the standing, I think it has an enormous hit on the United States for its reputation on the world stage. There will be foreign governments looking at this, scratching their heads, wondering how it is that the US is able to get itself into so many problems. And of course, that impacts the confidence that other countries have, even in investing in the United States, let alone doing long-term business deals. But there is, of course, that knock-on effect, that trickle-down for other countries around the world who are trying to do business with the federal government that has essentially been slowed up because perhaps federal workers here in the US have been furloughed and therefore are not in work and therefore cannot interact with foreign governments, with foreign companies, but also air travel as well. Even though the flight disruption has, for the majority, been for domestic flights, there have been some international flights as well that have been impacted, either delayed or perhaps even cancelled. So yes, this is a very domestic problem, all about funding the US government. But there are these far-reaching implications, these, I guess, waves that are being sent out from the US that are impacting other countries as well.
Nick Harper, thank you so much. That's Nick Harper, SABC correspondent in the United States. He takes us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Let's take you now to the markets desk, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 20 in South Africa, Botswana 13 Pula 26, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 20, Zambia 22 Kwacha 61, Kenya the dollar is 128 shilling 35, Ethiopia 153 birr 73, Uganda 3,000 shilling 488, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 453. $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 435. In Egypt, the dollar is 47 Egyptian pound 16. Tunisia, 2 dinar 93. Algeria, 129 dinar 47. Morocco, 90 ram 13. Angola, 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc is 2,129. And looking at commodities, gold is at $4,142. Platinum at $1,586 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $64.60 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest business of sport, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Post. So South Africa's Deputy Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Ms. Peace Mabe, has described the recent budget cuts as a thorny issue that continues to affect sporting federations across the country. Now, the department has faced criticism for slashing the sports budget by $116,000. Several federations, including Swimming South Africa, have expressed frustration as well over the reductions, saying the cuts are hampering their preparations for major international events such as the Olympic Games. Mabe confirmed that the ministry is currently engaging with the different federations to find practical solutions to fund these challenges.
With regard to budget cuts, it's a funny issue that we are still discussing. We've been having one-on-one meetings with different federations, firstly to understand their programs and also to understand how the budget cuts have affected their day-to-day running. But there's a plan to that. You would know that the minister's vision is to have a one-stop shop when it comes to sports.
Meanwhile, the Deputy Minister, who also serves alongside the Minister, Gayton McKenzie, emphasized the importance of the private sector involvement in supporting sports federations financially. Mabe said the government cannot do it alone. They cannot sustain all sporting codes and called for stronger partnerships with corporate South Africa to ensure that athletes continue to thrive.
But the second one is that we want to also say that as government, it is not possible for us to continue, to carry sports. But we want to aggressively challenge private sector to come on board and contribute, because without a private sector being on board, there is no way that we will win. Government, it is not sustainable. And you know that when budgets are cut, the first department where they look into it is sports, arts and culture. So we have suffered the budget cuts for a very, very, very long time.
Further afield now, the Turkish Football Federation has now suspended 1,024 players from its professional leagues as part of the investigation into betting. The TFF said players who had been identified as having bet on football, including 27 from Turkey's top flight football, have been referred to the country's Professional Football Disciplinary Board. Now, following the move, matches in the third as well as the fourth division of Turkish football have been postponed for 2 weeks, although games in the country's top two divisions will continue. The Turkey Football Federation has also asked World Football Governing Body FIFA for an extra 15 days in addition to the winter transfer window so that the clubs can deal with squad shortages. FIFA has asked to comment on this matter, and they since have not. Bakistas, one of Turkey's biggest football clubs, issued a statement saying 2 of their players have been referred to the PFDK and that they have full faith in the innocence of those players. Now, local media reports also report that 8 people, including a club chairman, had been arrested by the Turkish authorities as part of the investigation. The scandal initially hit the headlines back on the 27th of October when the TFF president Ibrahim Hakosnoguli had said hundreds of referees were linked to betting accounts. The president claimed that out of the 571 referees working in the Turkey's professional leagues, 371 had betting accounts and 152 were actively placing wagers. He also said the group included 7 referees as well as 15 assistant referees from Turkey's top 2 divisions, as well as 36 classified referees and 94 assistants from the level below. Now, the TFF president also added that 10 referees each placed more than 10,000 bets. One referee placed 18,227 bets, while 142 referees placed bets on more than 1,000 matches. Now, some referees only placed a single bet. Like players as well as coaches, match officials are forbidden from placing and participating in betting activities by the TFF regulations, as well as those of FIFA and European governing body UEFA. And finally, DP World has extended its title sponsorship of the European Tour, with the circuit now set to continue as the DP World Tour until 2035. The extension builds on the original agreement signed back in 2021 and is understood to be the largest commercial deal in the tour's history. Now, DP World will also continue as the tour's official logistics partner throughout the new term. Now, under the renewed agreement, DP World will remain title sponsors of the season-ending DP World Tour Championship in Dubai and act as a partner for the 15 tournaments this season. Now, the partnership also includes the return of the DP World India Championship next year, with the tour also aiming to establish as a permanent fixture on the calendar. The collaboration between DP World as well as the European Tour began back in 2009 and has now evolved into a global partnership supporting the sport's expansion, including within the UK. The DP World Tour features key events such as the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth, as well as the Betfred British Masters, which also forms part of the international golfing schedule. And that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call as well on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:39 Central African time. Thank you to Chanduko Ligege and Musibudi Makura. Still coming up for you within the next 30 minutes or so in our Standard Bank slot, we'll take a look at township businesses and the township economy. Can you believe that we're already talking festive season? We'll be talking about some of the safety elements that need to be put in place specifically for township entrepreneurs. But for now, South Africa's top bank, First National Bank, in collaboration with MasterCard, has announced the launch of Globa, a next-generation cross-border payment solution powered by MasterCard Move that's set to simplify as well as secure how South Africans send money abroad. The announcement was made on Tuesday in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thami Ngubeni compiled this report.
Cross-border payments and remittances remain vital for economic resilience across Africa, enabling customers to stay connected. With the newly announced FNB's Globa, a game changer in remittance payments, as the funds will be available immediately to an FNB-banked recipient in the other country. Powered by MasterCard Move, it will simplify and secure how South Africans send money abroad. The announcement was made in Johannesburg during a press briefing where the key players outlined how this partnership came about during a panel discussion. Richard Porter, FNB Forex, a Chief Executive Officer or CEO, says the partnership will ensure that their customers can send funds to their families in the age of globalization.
like most of the things we do, it's inspired by our customers. So it's to address a customer need. So there's clearly a need with globalization and the mobility of people around the globe. So people need to send money to their families, they need to pay for university fees, they need to just send money home. So it's a massive customer need that's been, I suppose, remained not effectively addressed for some time.
Furthermore, Gabriel Swanepoel, country manager, Southern Africa at MasterCard, just like Porter, says the customer is the main focus of this partnership.
I think we need to recognize the state of play across the continent of Africa, but more specifically in South Africa. And there's a vibrancy across our communities in the way that we collaborate and the way that we come together. Now, when we started speaking with FNB and we started comparing notes around, what good looks like, so to the point made a little bit earlier, if we put the customer at the heart of it.
This platform will strengthen key remittance corridors such as Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, and Ghana, fostering financial connectivity across borders while also providing near-instant connectivity to a wide range of countries around the world, covering different endpoints including bank accounts, mobile wallets, and cash pickup location. Meanwhile, Onur Korsun, Executive Vice President for Commercial and New Payment Flows at MasterCard, says their strategy is to ensure that consumers' funds are safe and secure as many customers on the continent depend on remittances.
First of all, when we are talking about remittances in Africa, we have to understand the importance of remittances. I mean, $100 billion comes to Africa every year. It is more than foreign direct investment into Africa. And this means that this is a lifeline for many consumers.
Sizwe Ngedlana, FNB Private CEO, says they have done well with digital payments and Globa will unlock financial inclusion.
For us, it's very much a foundational enabler. It's not just about a payment, it's what it unlocks and the trust and the safety and the transparency that it brings.
Latanya Johnson, FNB Personal CEO, says the data will enable customers to access more financial services.
What this allows us to do is you start capturing the data, the history, the behavior, the mobile information, which opens up a world of financial solutions.
Meanwhile, Tim Masela, former head for National Payment System Department at the South African Reserve Bank, spoke from a regulatory perspective on remittances.
I will indicate that in the continental context, our view is that we should try, let's say, from where South Africa is sitting, if we can solve for most of the problems in the small sub-region of CMA, let's say, it's a model that we can expand into SADC and take into the continental stage.
For Channel Africa News, I am Thami Ngubeni in Johannesburg.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
From Johannesburg, South Africa to Brazil, where the COP30 Climate Summit has opened with a message from the United Nations that countries seek cooperation rather than battling over competing priorities that continue to fracture the consensus-seeking approach of the gathering. Host country Brazil brokered a deal on the agenda for the two-week summit in the Amazon city of Belém, deflecting attempts by developing country negotiating blocs to shoehorn contentious issues like climate finance as well as carbon taxes into the talks. The gathering expects some 50,000 delegates from governments, civil society and the private sector in the latest effort to protect the planet from climate catastrophe. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
With over 190 countries participating in this year's event, the urgency is palpable after the latest UN emissions gap report found that under the Paris Climate Agreement, available new climate pledges have only slightly lowered global temperature rise over the course of this century, leaving the world heading for a serious escalation of climate risks and damages. With a message from the UN that countries should engage rather than find reasons to bicker. Listen to the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Simon Steele.
Friends, let me be clear. In this arena of COP30, your job here is not to fight one another. Your job here is to fight this climate crisis together. Paris is working to deliver real progress. Let's not forget that.
Views echoed by the host country's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
É momento de impor uma nova derrota aos negacionistas.
It's time to inflict another defeat on the deniers.
Que se os homens que fazem guerra.
Without the Paris Agreement, the world would be doomed to catastrophic warming of almost 5 degrees by the end of the century. We are moving in the right direction, but at the wrong speed. If the men who wage war were here at this COP, they would realize that it is much cheaper to invest $1.3 trillion to solve the climate problem than to invest $2.7 trillion to wage war, as they did last year.
The United States is boycotting the gathering given a shift in America's approach after President Donald Trump made his views on climate change clear at the UN General Assembly this September.
The carbon footprint is a hoax made up by people with evil intentions, and they're heading down a path of total destruction. I withdrew from the fake Paris Climate Accord, where, by the way, America was paying so much more than every country. Others weren't paying. And if you look back years ago in the 1920s and the 1930s, they said, global cooling will kill the world. We have to do something. Then they said global warming will kill the world, but then it started getting cooler, so now they could just call it climate change, because that way they can't. It's climate change, because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, there's climate change. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
As the fossil fuel glut persists, with some countries now openly bucking the international consensus to move away from resources that are the primary driver of a warming planet. Listen to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
Scientists tell us that overshooting 1.5 degrees is now inevitable, starting at the latest in the early 2030s. But how high and how long that overshoot lasts depends on the speed and scale of our actions today. To return below 1.5 degrees by century's end, global emissions must fall by almost half by 2030, reach net zero by 2050, and go on with net negative afterwards. Renewables are now the cheapest source of new electricity in nearly every country. They are powering prosperity and empowering communities long left in the dark. Every dollar invested in renewables creates 3 times more jobs than a dollar invested in fossil fuels, and clean energy jobs now outnumber fossil fuel jobs worldwide. The renewables revolution is here. But we must go much faster.
The COP30 conference marks 3 decades since the global climate negotiations began. According to the organizers, 3 priorities will dominate the agenda: climate financing, or put another way, finding the money, the transition away from fossil fuels, and the international cooperation required to achieve that, and finally, efforts to return a warming planet to below the 1.5 degrees Celsius rise, and the political will needed to protect billions of people who could face an existential threat given the planet's current warming projections. I'm Sherwin Bryce Pease in New York.
That's Sherwin Bryce Pease taking us to exactly 10 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. In just a moment, we'll be bidding you farewell as Africa in Business, but not before we say bonjour to Joël and Vue d'Afrique. You're coming up soon. Bonjour, madame.
Bonjour, Thami. Bonjour à tous les éditeurs de Channel Africa. Vue d'Afrique, c'est dans quelques petites minutes. Et sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question aujourd'hui du Cameroun. L'ultimatum de 48 heures lancé par l'opposant Issa Chiroma Bakary pour la libération des manifestants arrêtés dernièrement. Et nous parlerons aussi de la 2e journée du procès pour corruption de l'ancienne première dame du Gabon et de son fils. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci, Thami.
Merci beaucoup. Restez connectés as Vue d'Afrique comes up at the top of the hour. It's 4:50.
The world is watching Johannesburg. Leaders from the planet's biggest economies gather to make decisions that shape nations, markets, and futures. You already know, Channel Africa will be right there, bringing you the conversations, insights, and analysis that matter.
The best is yet to come.
The G20 Summit from the 22nd to the 23rd of November. As it happens, from an African perspective, stay tuned to Channel Africa and get all the G20 analysis. African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Well, as the festive season fast approaches, businesses, whether large or small, all are anticipating higher than usual activity as consumer spending rises during this time of the year. Township businesses, which have become convenient for their communities, are at risk of falling prey to criminal elements, as some don't have the safe payment solutions needed in order to safeguard themselves and even their consumers, their customers. For more on this, we're joined by Norman Nyawo. Norman is the head of Merchant Solutions at Business and Commercial Banking at the Standard Bank Group. A very good afternoon to you, Norman. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Thanks for having me on your platform and looking forward to a good conversation.
I was just saying earlier on to our listeners that I can't believe we're talking festive season already. The year has just skyrocketed so fast. And it is during this time where it's around festive season that most township businesses have issues of safety. And safe payment solutions once again become the order of our focus. Could you tell us more about what type of solutions township businesses have for safe payment solutions, especially around the festive season and also as we prepare for Black Friday?
Great. So I think the tide has really turned from a township perspective. Cash still does dominate the townships a lot, but what we're seeing is a shift towards digital payments and an adoption of affordable card machines, QR codes, and all sorts of wallets that that can be accepted. So we really are seeing these townships move to these types of digital solutions, and especially from a Standard Bank perspective, we have some really interesting solutions. One that we call Simply Blue, which is an all-in-one platform that combines card payments, QR codes, inventory management, and it's got a built-in e-commerce platform as well, which we really start seeing, small businesses starting to look at solutions like that to see how they can alleviate them and accept secure card payments all in one.
There's one thing having the infrastructure to enable these type of payments, but what has the uptake been like from consumers? How fast and agreeable is adaptation?
I think we've seen, quite strong adoption across the board. But as I said, I think there's still, especially in the townships and some of the informal sectors, we're still seeing that cash still does dominate. But what we really try to do is to work closely with people on the ground and inform and actually showcase to traders, to informal sectors, the sorts of solutions that we offer. Because I think the more that we actually are able to showcase and to educate, I guess, some of the SMEs that we work with or that are exposed with, the more adoption that we see. So definitely in the cases where we've been able to showcase what we have and the solutions we've got, we're seeing some great adoption. But there's definitely still a long way to go in terms of making sure that some of the solutions that we have, which are quite easy to access and very affordable, are actually taken up faster at a faster rate than what we're seeing right now.
You mentioned Simply Blue as one of your solutions. Can you take us through the other options that you as Standard Bank have?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Simply Blue is probably from an all-in-one payment solution that really does combine a whole lot of different card payment options. QR codes like SnapScan is also built into that. But I think the other one, as I mentioned, is SnapScan. So SnapScan is actually another low-cost mobile-based QR payment solution that is really quite ideal for small businesses and informal traders who really don't want to have some sort of really can't even afford to actually buy a point-of-sale device. So that's another quite a cheap way of accepting payment. We've also got instant money from Standard Bank as well. So some of our merchants can accept instant money as well. And again, instant money is a wallet-based solution where customers who still prefer cash potentially can go and withdraw, cardless withdrawals at ATMs or retail partners as well. So there's quite an array of solutions that we have. But definitely, I think for the informal traders and the small SMEs, I think they should definitely look at Simply Blue. I think it really covers everything. It actually comes with a mobile app as well. So on the mobile app, you can also accept payment via QR. And again, you don't really need to have a point of sale device to start accepting payment and manage your store online.
I mean, do you think having such platforms would ensure growth for these businesses?
Definitely. I think what we're seeing, especially with Black Friday looming, that the idea for small businesses is that they have to be able to position themselves and put their businesses in spaces they've never had before. So being able to put your store into or expanding it into an online environment gives a small business or an informal trader, I suppose, access to a broader set of customers. But some of the tools that we also offer in the solutions we offer, it helps a small business to track sales, to manage stock. You can start building a credit profile. You can automatically also start getting access to funding or lending to restock or to just grow your business as well. So it is quite important, I think, for small businesses to take on some of these solutions, because in the modern age kind of era where you need to compete against some of the more established businesses, this does give smaller business an edge to be able to kind of compete accordingly.
Are there education initiatives that you put together as Standard Bank to inform the small business owners of the benefits and the upside of this? Because one of the big challenges is, readiness to actually start accessing funding. And as you mentioned, you get to build a credit profile, you're able to manage your stock, track your sales, etc. And those are all the building blocks that are needed, as you are, putting together those funding profiles.
Yes, definitely. I think we do have enterprise development programs that we run throughout the country. But if you go on to, I think if the listeners or anyone who's interested can go on to www.standardbank.co.za on the business banking side, you'll see there's definitely access to programs. I'm happy to give that information offline to you. But in essence, we've got material there that can that can actually help the small business or informal traders around how they can get access to the funding, how they can tap into some of these solutions as well. But we've got some real tailor-made solutions as well from a banking perspective. The one that we call BizFlex, which is really a lending product where, in essence, businesses can actually get a loan to fund their business and pay it off as they earn revenue. So there's no fixed amount. You get a custom amount. And as you actually start earning revenue from your business, it's tailor-made. The loan amount that you pay back is tailor-made based on your revenue. So it's those types of tools which we really see that can assist the small business to, one, get something that works with how much they're making, but at the same time doesn't put too much pressure, for them to get a big amount that they probably might not be able to service. Yeah.
Some awesome solutions there, Norman. Thank you so much for putting all of that into context for us this afternoon. You've yourself a splendid afternoon further.
Thanks, Thami. Thanks for having me on your platform.
That's great. That's Norman Nyawo. He's head of merchant solutions at business and commercial banking at the Standard Bank Group. And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Africa in Business. I'm Thami Ngubeni, and from myself and the entire team, you have yourself a splendid afternoon further. Restez connectés as Vue d'Afrique comes up at the top of the hour.